nossa Fábrica das Palavras também tem o simbolismo de estar aqui mesmo encostadinho ao nosso Rio Tejo. Eu costumo dizer que em Vila Franca, como em muitas outras coisas, o rio também não anda só num sentido, porque de 4 em 4 horas, ora a água vai para baixo, no sentido de Lisboa, ora vem para cima, e hoje está ainda numa terceira situação em que vocês aqui mesmo ao lado nem conseguem ver o Tejo, está tanto nevoeiro, mas ele vai levantar, seguramente vai levantar. Queria só aqui dizer 2 ou 3 coisas. A primeira é que este tipo de organização, vocês têm mais ou menos 20 anos, não é? Não, 11, mas antes de serem associação, exatamente, portanto já têm um trabalho mesmo anterior ao facto de se terem formalizado. É importante que se tenham formalizado, por um conjunto de razões vastas, até institucionais, mas este trabalho é um trabalho que é muito importante e que custa muito a ter resultados, não é? E é verdade, eu estava há pouco a conversar aqui com a vossa Presidente, mesmo Portugal, num contexto da integração, tem muito pouco tempo de trabalho. Efetivamente, talvez há uns 30 anos é que se começou, começou institucionalmente o país a ter preocupações, nomeadamente com as questões das acessibilidades. E há muito trabalho feito, nomeadamente há muito trabalho feito pelas autarquias, quer na acessibilidade do espaço público, quer na acessibilidade dos serviços públicos, e é um trabalho que nunca está acabado, há sempre imensa coisa para fazer, e é nisso também que estamos apostados. E no contexto da acessibilidade aos museus, também, desde logo a acessibilidade física, como é óbvio, mas não só física, nomeadamente para todas as pessoas que têm outro tipo de limitações, quer visuais, quer auditivas, enfim. E também aí nós temos vindo a trabalhar, nomeadamente recorrendo ao que são as novas tecnologias. O tema de hoje, que levantam aqui da emergência climática e a cultura, também ele tem de certeza imensas perspectivas de análise. Nós estamos, só para terem uma ideia, nós estamos dentro das portas de Lisboa. Raras são as capitais que têm uma reserva natural inserida na sua sala de estar, mas é incrível, nós fizemos agora um estudo por causa do plano de atividades da Reserva Natural do Estuário do Tejo, dos 2 milhões e 500 mil cidadãos aqui à volta de Lisboa, pouquíssimos têm a ideia de que existe a Reserva Natural do Estuário do Tejo e ainda muitíssimo menos sabem ou já foram à Reserva Natural do Estuário do Tejo, quando ela tem, por exemplo, o maior espaço de nidificação e observação de aves da Europa, que é o EVOA. E vêm imensos estrangeiros a observar aves para aqui, e os portugueses são muito menos, e os de Lisboa muito menos ainda. Portanto, há aqui um caminho enorme a fazer sob o ponto de vista ambiental e cultural, porque também é cultural, e é preciso mesmo fazer esse caminho. Estamos aqui junto ao nosso caminho ribeirinho e nós temos vindo a fazer, quer de um lado, quer do outro do Tejo, a reposição dos ecossistemas. E é engraçado porque a posição das pessoas que são pelo ambiente, todos nós achamos que somos pelo ambiente, é isto que eu quero dizer. Todos achamos que somos pelo ambiente. Mas quando a gente começa a fazer a reposição de ecossistemas, o que é que acontece? Há mais vegetação, há mais animais, há mais pássaros, enfim, há um conjunto de natureza que invade a cidade. E a reação para quem passeia no caminho ribeirinho e acha que é pelo ambiente, pá, isto aqui está muito desorganizado, há muitas plantas, deviam estar mais organizadas, há aqui muitos pássaros, não havia pássaros, quer dizer, nós achamos uma coisa, mas depois intimamente, às vezes, fazemos outra ou não chegamos ainda lá. O trabalho destas associações é fundamental nessa perspectiva de mudança profunda da nossa sociedade. Eu espero que seja um bom dia de trabalho. Espero também que aproveitem para voltar a Vila Franca nestas e noutras ocasiões. Terão, de certeza, muita coisa sob o ponto de vista cultural, mas também ambiental, que vale a pena aqui. Por isso, à Senhora Presidente e a toda a organização, muito, muito obrigado por terem vindo a Vila Franca de Xira e um bom dia de trabalho para vocês.
Este tema da emergência climática foi-nos sugerido no final da nossa conferência anual o ano passado por algumas das pessoas que estavam presentes. Abro parênteses, Se alguém este ano sentir que quer muito que um tema seja o tema da nossa próxima Conferência Anual, aproveitem. Em relação às questões da emergência climática, sentimos que em Portugal não estamos a questionar-nos verdadeiramente sobre o papel que a cultura pode ter em relação exatamente à emergência de que estamos a enfrentar. Temos conhecimento que existem vários projetos e iniciativas que muitas vezes correspondem mais a uma inquietação individual e não existe, no entanto, uma consciência generalizada e partilhada e ainda muito menos uma visão e exigência. Estamos todos ainda um bocadinho na camada da superfície e ainda não entranha naquilo que é o nosso dia-a-dia e o nosso processo. E mesmo esta preocupação e inquietação que existe por parte de alguns colegas do setor cultural não é igual em todos os parâmetros. Aqui tenho que dizer que as artes performativas, como também em muitos outros temas, estão muitas vezes alguns passos à frente, nomeadamente destas estruturas mais pesadas que são os museus. Gostaríamos ainda de partilhar a nossa preocupação com a crescente demonização que está a acontecer relativamente aos ativistas climáticos. E esta demonização acontece sem que primeiro nem sequer haja uma vontade de os ouvir realmente. E acresce ainda também o facto de que vemos reproduzido e repetido pelos nossos colegas profissionais da cultura afirmações que não são verdadeiras. Afirmações de que determinadas obras de arte e determinado património está a ser destruído pela ação destes ativistas e não é verdade. Temos que também ter muito cuidado nós de não replicar laivos de populismo que circulam com muita facilidade. Queria só, porque nunca mais me esqueci da intervenção da Susana Gomes da Silva, nossa colega do Centro de Arte Moderna da Fundação Calouste Gulbenkian, num encontro em que na audiência surge exatamente esta reação muito radical contra os ativistas climáticos, com a anuência das pessoas que estavam na conferência, e a Susana tem uma intervenção que me ficou marcada. Ela diz, e as palavras não são exatas, são interpretadas por mim, mas o que ela diz é que se gastamos tanta energia, da nossa energia enquanto profissionais da cultura, a analisar e a recriminar as consequências, porque é que não gastamos igual energia a examinar as causas que levam a estas ações? E necessitamos, como disse no início, cada vez mais de espaços onde possamos dialogar. E eu creio que hoje estamos num espaço e num momento onde poderemos dialogar e ouvir-nos uns aos outros. E, em relação à conferência deste ano, não queria deixar de dar um especial agradecimento à Margarida Ferro, que está aqui, e ao António Pedro Lopes, que nos ajudaram tanto na construção do programa desta conferência, com imensas sugestões e que também estarão connosco a moderar 2 painéis. Por fim, são mesmo os últimos agradecimentos, agradecer aos meus colegas de direção, aqui mesmo à minha frente a Graça Santa Bárbara, a Ana Sofia ainda não chegou, Ana Sofia Nunes, o Hugo Sousa, outro colega, também ainda não chegou, e a Inês Rodrigues, também nossa colega da direção, que sei muito que ela queria estar hoje, mas infelizmente não vai poder estar connosco, mas está aqui. Queria também agradecer à Ângela Batista, eu creio que provavelmente vocês já interagiram com ela de forma online, é a nossa responsável pelo Secretariado da Acesso Cultura e está connosco hoje. Pronto, todas as pessoas que eu queria apresentar pela primeira vez não estão neste momento, é fantástico. Eu própria não conheço a Ângela e estou com muita vontade de lhe dar um abraço e estamos muito felizes que ela possa estar connosco hoje. E o último agradecimento, essa está presente aqui, já está presente há umas boas horas, a nossa diretora executiva, Maria Vlacho, por todo o trabalho, profissionalismo e dedicação. Muito obrigada a todos. agora já não na qualidade de presidente, mas na qualidade de semi-moderadora. Passamos agora à nossa keynote, Máret Sara, artista, autora de livros, expõe o seu trabalho desde 2003 e aborda frequentemente as questões políticas e sociais das perspectivas Sami e indígena. Máret, can I ask you to come, please? Thank you very much.
Good day, everyone. Hello. I'm very sorry I don't speak Portuguese, so I wasn't really able to follow the introduction, but I'll do my best to contextualize my presentation for you today. I want to just start by tasting the word green colonialism and just wondering a little bit about what this concept is. For me, it's quite difficult. It's playing quite heavily upon climate change, upon a very existential fear that's present in almost every part of the world. But it's also playing quite deeply in the roots of capitalism. So, yeah, I think I'll just start this presentation to tell you one story from my part of the world, which is in Sápmi. That's in the northernmost part of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and also in the yeah, I'm a little bit nervous. Yeah, but Sápmi, it's divided in 4 countries, also in Russia. So we are dealing with 4 national states with quite different strategies and hence also struggles for my community and people. The Sami, for those of you who don't know, are the indigenous population of my area. So that means we were there prior or before the national states were established. All right, let's start. Hopefully afterwards we'll be able to have a little bit of a conversation if you have any questions. I come from a traditional Sami reindeer herding family on both sides, mother's sides and father's sides. So these are initial questions. I grew up in beautiful natural surroundings, but also in meetings, conflicts, and fights with politicians, police, industrial initiators, and local communities that see us as intruders and obstacles in our own lands. We have for decades been fighting destruction of our grazing lands due to oil and gas establishments, mining, and now in the face of the green shift, in question mark, we're also fighting numerous windmill parks and power lines. In 2014, on top of these very intrusive land fights, we also got a letter from the government informing that the forced culling of our reindeer was about to start. Why, you might ask? The argumentation was ecological. They said it was to save our lands from our reindeer. Sorry, this one is jumped. Oh, yeah. No, it's okay. So it was basically said that we had to forcefully slaughter our reindeers to save our lands and to save our own future. For those of you who might read Norwegian, I'm aware not many might, but if you would have been able to read Norwegian, you would have seen a very clear and broad tendency from these headlines. Because the reality is that the Norwegian government has had has executed official assimilation of my people from the 1850s until the 1970s, even the 80s. After the official assimilation process was abolished, withholding information about the assimilation was also a strategy. This allowed grassroots racism to continue, and it also allowed for us to ultimately have a generally uninformed public and press with little capacity to question, understand, or even recognize current colonial struggles. Racism and prejudice has left us easy targets politically and socially, and we have had little credibility even about our own matters and truth. The authorities have had the power of definition, with an unnuanced media reproducing a one-sided narrative to the society at large. I'm sorry, this is jumping without me doing anything. So the Sami reindeer herders, my society, have been portrayed through the medias and through the power structures as ecological villains who, by having reindeers, are destroying the tundra with constant overgrazing. According to the official narrative, there has always been too many reindeer. The interesting question thus remains unanswered. In relation to what? This has, throughout the times, been a shifting narrative, but in recent decades, industrial capitalism has been a main interest, and now ecology lately has been a very popular and valid argument to win the public. Sorry. So, just to tell you a little bit what this meant in reality for my society. In this process, the government set a percentage of reindeer to be slaughtered. But who had to slaughter and how much, that was called self-determination and left for us to decide. It became like a bone to a hungry crowd. It put sister against brother. It was in reality a divide and conquer strategy. When people were not able to agree, a collective punishment was set off. Everyone was ordered to slaughter the same percentage of their herd, regardless how many reindeer they had to begin with. This left a small and fragile community in conflicts and desperate competition for survival. And youth, like my brother, who were only establishing as reindeer herders, were forced to bankruptcy and thereby forced away from traditional way of life, culture, and rights. Our community was wounded, fractured, and recruitment to Sami reindeer herding was actively strangled. Even though sorry, I get a little bit distracted by that. Yeah, even though the state throughout this process and throughout time has had very full control over how many reindeer each has had and where these reindeer have been at all times, it was never regarded where a potential overgrazing would be a problem or who might be responsible. So to this day, there has been no assessment of consequences upon individuals or community from this process. The reason I'm telling you this story is basically also to make visible how modern democracies and also the best countries in the world play a crucial role in the processes that often take place in the name of green ecology, or what might be more true as green colonial processes. This timeline hopefully would give an understanding of how the process was planned and executed, actually by utilizing all parts of the democratic system. In 2011, that's when I left journalism for art because of the complexity and gravity of the situation. This is when the mineral strategy called Nordområdesatsningen was finally launched, and mineral findings perpetrated in reality our entire region. That's the map you see on the top. This was truly scary to see, and action was needed. In 2012, the government granted concession for 300 kilometers, 190 miles of new power lines to support the energy-demanding industry of mining. And remember, these are minerals that now are very much advocated for in the green shift. So for all electric cars, and so forth. It's even difficult to argue against such brutal ecological destructions because it's now using the argument of the common good ecological shift. So in 2013, the government started media campaigning to portray the financial values in our grounds, calling it now the new national economy and creating enormous expectations and pressure for the industry to be established. At the same time, the government proposed changes in the legislation to support the forced culling, meaning that they had a clean back legally to proceed this process of forced culling. The parliament approved the change of the law, overlooking both the Sami parliament, which is our official voice, and also overlooking the Norwegian Reindeer Herding Association, who tried to oppose it. 2014, they publicly announced the forced cullings. In 2015, our community was in panic and distress. 619 reindeer owners gathered for a collective lawsuit against the Norwegian government. Unfortunately, the foundation who gathered these distressed reindeer owners was a pretend, and nothing happened with the lawsuit. In 2016, there was only one person left standing, and that was my brother, who at the time was 23 years old. He was not willing to give up his traditional livelihood and life, his property, his own and our collective rights. So how was this possible? How could all this happen without anyone seeing or questioning the gravity of the situation and the hollowness of the official argumentation, the parallel interests and the dramatic consequences? We were under critical attack, yet invisible. So Pailo Sápmi, this artwork, was born to claim attention, claim our reality, retell our story, fill in information gaps, educate press and public, activate critical awareness, activate debate, mobilize, and push for change. That's a pretty big task, if you ask me. The piece, oh my God. The piece is a reference to pile of bones, which indeed is a picture of the colonial strategies from the 1800s in North America, where the massacre of the buffaloes was a political strategy to access indigenous lands and to get control over the indigenous people. I made this piece to create awareness and a language for what I felt was happening in Norway now. New colonialism, bureaucratized colonialism, where intentions are the same, though methods have changed. Today, the most advanced democracy doesn't hand out guns to massacre our animals, but pass out laws and politics for the same intentions. They want our land, but we stand in the way. We won the first trial based on human rights, but the government appealed. We won the second trial. In addition to human rights, the appeal court added that the government also violates my brother's right to practice his culture. The Norwegian government appealed again, and the case was approved to the Norwegian Supreme Court. As my brother went to court in Oslo, I raised Pailo Sápmi Supreme outside of the Norwegian parliament. So this is the art project. These are my own artworks, which I placed outside of the courthouses for every trial. But along with my own artworks, I also formed the project as an interdisciplinary, collective, and curatorial project that followed the legal trials, almost as an activistic public festival, where I invited relevant artists, activists, academics within law, society, health, and politicians as well. I did so to gather voices and perspectives to activate deep thinking and debate in all layers of society. This way, art and artists became important witnesses, also to contextualize our case in relation to historical colonial history and to the cumulative effects of such upon life, culture, health, and rights. I also arranged art lotteries to mobilize society and to gather funds for the legal costs. In the end, over 40 artists donated art, and we collected over 200,000 Norwegian kroners, approximately 17,000 euros. I want to show this slide to show how we, in the end, managed to draw international attention through art and how we managed to broaden the discussion to not simply debate the amount of reindeer, such as the government wanted the public narrative to go, but instead contextualized reindeer in context of constant destruction of grazing lands. We managed to puncture the hollow ecological argumentation in that way. But to do so, we needed to fight with all means, through law, through art, through press, to reach press and public, and hopefully politics. And we needed international awareness, because Norway is either blind or unwilling to address its own colonial heritage and current day practice. Oh. Yeah, I see you have actually the wrong presentation here. I don't know how we solve this. Yeah, let me just see. Yeah. I'm very sorry. But since we have this slide, it actually gives a good opportunity to talk a little bit about maybe more focus to the green ecological aspect. Because if you see from 2018, while we were fighting to protect our reindeers, while also fighting the destruction of our grazing lands, mainly in my region for mining, another reindeer herding Sida from the south Sami region, which is approximately in the middle of Norway, had already for 20 years been fighting what I assume still is the largest windmill park in Europe to be established on the reindeer herding area. So while we lost in Supreme Court in 2018, the UN Committee on the SERD, you see here, they also wrote to the Norwegian government to stop the process of this windmill establishment on the reindeer herding area, but Norway refused. So they overlooked even the United Nations. So they pushed forward. We also tried to oversend our case to the Human Rights Committee in the UN. And through art and activism, we managed to push our case for voting in the Norwegian Parliament, and they were supposed to vote for whether or not to await the conclusion from the UN Human Rights Commission, and they voted, we don't, because in the end it doesn't really matter. The United Nations doesn't go legally above the legislation in Norway. So they pushed for our reindeer to be slaughtered and not wait for the UN. So we managed to get a personal solution to this. Internally in our family, my uncle quit his reindeer herding, and by that we fled from our father's traditional lands and took over the sort of the grazing rights of my uncle in my mother's traditional territories. So we managed to dodge the bullet, but not through the legal system or a political change. So when they started to establish this windmill park in Fosen, they were also in trial. So in 3 years ago, 2021, the Fosen Sami won a historical verdict in the Norwegian Supreme Court, which stated that this windmill park that the government pushed for, not listening to the UN and anyone else, they built the park. It's still standing. The Samis won, saying that this was illegal, it was a human rights breach. And the government still now, 3 years later, they have refused to take down the windmill park. And I guess out of exhaustion, the Samis who have been fighting for now 23 or more years, they agreed that they are relocated to a different place. So they lost their lands. And believe you me that the green shift is heavily used in all of these processes, for mining, for windmill, for everything. And wearing this suit that plays on, the fear of everyone and the narrative of a better world, a better future for everyone, it's very, very difficult for a tiny little community to fight. And it goes on the cost of most of our rights, human, cultural, the rights to our own property, and so forth. So, yeah, and this is just an example of how I used art after this process, because art is my voice, it's my soul, and I've used art as a weapon in these most critical times, but I also use art to rebuild myself and to rebuild hope, and to be able to work towards a better future regardless. So I think since we got the wrong presentation, I will let you just see this last with Pailo Sápmi, the art project, the very activistic art project. It gained so much attention that it was presented at Documenta in Kassel in 2017. It also managed to get New York Times flying to Oslo reporting about this case when we were in Supreme Court. And that led to many good discussions, for instance, by BBC and other press, who then managed to broaden the discussion, not to only be a narrative about us being fools, destroying our own livelihoods by our own just existence. So they were able then to question, these layers of what's really happening, what are the bigger intentions in this area, and what are the costs. And if you really want to save Sami reindeer husbandry, why don't you start by securing the land that we depend on, instead of pushing it to more and more destruction through these industries. So after this process, I was invited to Venice Biennial, and instinctively I said no, I don't want to, because I was exhausted. This is not an art project I chose for my pleasure. It was a necessity, and in order to carry it through, I had to use every little bit of myself, and that means soul and all of my capacity. And I've been addressing the world's biggest art scenes. I've been speaking through my art from there. I've been speaking through the most powerful medias, and still nothing helped us. So when I got the invitation for Venice, I just felt that I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to amuse the world with my existential pain. But then my curator at the time, she asked me to use art for what I needed at the time. And that was to rebuild hope and to deal with, the existential costs of processes like this. So I will end my presentation by showing you this little intro for the Venice Biennial, and after that, let's talk. Yeah, I might need help.
Joo, mun muistan tällä, kun mullekin manna. Eli tämä puhumuspaikki mun mainimista oli ahtimilta lähtee seittas. Ja mun tihtin, että mun silkku äsken mäkäkin hähti no kuhku ahtille loppida. Ahti joudaa puhuvaitsuoda ja mahtaa puhut. Oktavaa sahus min muille huikarraisi pahtsan muistui. Tähli johtaa kiddaa kiäsi, kun miltä ollen tohko käsorhaakki faalai. Ja mullekin näin tehkä mun aallohi noihin mun aikon ahtimilta. Ja hila on aallut, jos mun mielessä vähän arrun, kun mannakaan juokseis mieltä ja nammatsit parkkusista. Mutta leikuitaa vohon tehkä jäädä, kun mun maasina mun aikon mieltä tohko. Ohta johkin. Minä mä jävla ahtin vulkki. Mä välttiin mun mieltä. Mä näin mä hammat päästä kauppakin. Ja tämä oli kohko pultti viissui. Pultti all rinken täällä. Pohti tohko. Tiin pohti spåret ei blomsteri. Ja mun ini, milloin tekoon tilaalla suoda, jos tällöin vaatsin näin maanaiskuulullekin. Mun miettis. Mutta mä mun muistan tällä mun ahti riuttai. Kun mä pohdin mun lohkan pulttiin viissui ja pulttia johkaan uppi päällä peautti uniformin ja kaitsalla ahti tei pohtsui pirra. Ja muistan ahtista riuttai mitä se riuttai jiena ja tässä riuttai haatsa. Ja tiedli mun ja mun tässä lähtössä taravaanan muistui. Ja tällä jos tamman ja raavisammusin huijoluparakan tein just tein faamo. Ehpe voikkala suolin. Ahte huijoluaasi min ellimis, min elähosaikon. Tällä teko älä ollut muitte faamuvalde ja mi silteko peilo suotta manki lahkai vaihkuista ja puoriitista ja sudsiedjemet. Ja tahka joita olomin. Tänne tjoavjis, että ei hui luntulas ja hui kuottaji mun täällä. Tän akto vuodessa, että muu holmus reageeri ja kuottaa puhua vaasahosait. Puhut karraa semmoista touttuut, että hän tjuggis tjoavjai outomusat. Nuohti tientaafus, tällä mun mielestä hui karraa symbola. Mä hain mehtomisaashit. Fyysiologisesti juhtset olot mun hellesui ja tän jälkeen olot mun ällini. Tässä ahte muut abstrakta aashit lohpasrad rumaslast. Jos on jutsalahti toutupirra, että pohjaa joavi, mannu siivas. Tiellä huimielläkin vas mun mielestä täällä parkkaatettiin teikon jouvihkon. Kun on kahku teit fanaha läht, tää raikana muhtumin tää joavi, mi reftimiltele no rassi. Just det samma kun min rekti, eli raafis ja terveysvuodessa. Mun on teos alulämys hui naakkar, hui tseakkaas manna ja tämän oktuvuus mun muistan niin softa raavoka, mille taravana muuten kuin milli. Tässä sahtamalla hänellä maailman puolella tinka lähki naakkar. Mutta on för tohtaa, että naakkar vuoda ei käyvä ihtan rekkitta.
All right, so I just wanted to say one last note that 2 months ago, in September, we received an email. The Human Rights Committee from the, I'm so sorry. The UN Human Rights Committee finally concluded our case, and their verdict is that Norwegian government indeed violates my brother's human rights, that the Norwegian Supreme Court has failed in their verdict, and that the state has to repair the damage. We've yet not heard anything from the Norwegian authorities, and they have refused to comment the case to the media. So this is reality from beneath the fairy tales. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Máret, for your presentation. We only have, I'm just going to speak a little bit in Portuguese now, just to give some indications. Nós temos 5 minutos, portanto eu vou ter o privilégio de poder fazer 1, 2 perguntas à Máret, depois passaremos ao próximo painel, mas durante o intervalo poderão de certeza aproveitar e falar com a Máret. I was just saying that we only have like 5 minutes, so I have the privilege to ask you a few questions, and then in the break we can all talk together, okay? I was wondering, and I wanted to ask you, how open was the National Museum of Norway to presenting your work? How did the museum react?
That was actually quite surprising. It was after Documenta that I was approached by the National Museum. My problem at the time was that it was very difficult for me to imagine, after losing the trials, to imagine that the national institution would also own our testimony, the witness that finally managed to put it in sight, you know, this invisible, bureaucratized new colonialism. So I had demands for the National Museum. I said the only way I can imagine you buying this artwork is if you agree that you will never store it away, because we all know that politics shift, political climates. It was already blowing very heavily, you know, the red winds, the right political winds in entire Europe, also America. So I was really afraid that if we are suddenly in a position in Norway where it's not favorable to be talking about Sami issues, then it would be so easy to censor this voice. And my worst fear would be that anyone would have to do this fight again just to find words, just to make it visible, so that it could still continue and we would, you know, be in this hamster wheel forever. So it was a heavy negotiation that lasted for years. I was talking to a fellow indigenous artist from Australia, airing this frustration to him about selling work to the National Museum. And he advised me, actually, that why don't you just set demands? And he had sold a very important artwork to the National Museum in Sydney, and he at the time managed to have it on permanent display, but also have it positioned as the first artwork to see, to walk through before you were allowed to even enter the narrative of the national history or narrative at large. So all of these, I just felt it was very empowering. So when talking to the National Museum of Norway, for them these was like drastic ideas, like how do you even come up with these things? We've never done it. So it was very empowering for me to be able to point to others that had done the same, and thereby also to encourage or put the National Museum, I don't know, in the forefront of exercising change or be progressive. So in the end, when they were not willing to meet my demands, I actually had to put an ultimatum. I said, if you're not willing to meet my demands, I would rather give this artwork for free to the Sami collection rather than selling it to you. So that was a changing point, and then we were able to negotiate for real. So I wasn't able to get a permanent display of my artwork, but I managed to get an agreement that if they put down my artwork, they have to offer it back to my community, to some Sami art institution that then will be able to hang it to ensure that it's always present for children.
And not in storage.
So that we are debating it, like how is democracy used nowadays for colonial purposes. And then they actually, even though it wasn't my demand to have it placed as the first artwork of the museum, they actually chose to do that themselves after our conversation. So now this artwork, the Pailo Sápmi Supreme, is hanging in the entrance of the National Museum in Norway. So I think it's a very slow change, but art, in my belief, has the capacity to change because it's speaking on so many levels. It's not only talking from an intellectual perspective, but it's reaching out to people's hearts.
Emotions, yes.
Emotions, yeah. So just having the piece there, I think it might, if not change, but at least, how it's the word?
Making some...
Yeah, at least
shifts.
Making some questions appear, like what is the Sami narrative in context of Norway, in context of Scandinavia? Why are we talking about a colonial matter in Norway? Because, as I said, it's been a strategy to hide the colonial process. So it's something that even the Norwegian nation is not aware of. So it's a very, I think it's...
Can I ask you if the museum has taken any position regarding the climate emergency?
Oh, wow, I don't know. I'm not dealing with the museum, on a daily basis. I'm just talking with them if there's a dialogue with my art, so to say. I'm not best friends with them, so you have to probably ask the museum.
Okay, I was just asking because having your work might have led them, as a national museum, to take a stand.
Oh, no, I don't think so. In Norway, they are really careful not to take a stand in anything, to be neutral and, in all matters, because they are so tied to the state by funding and political will, everything. So they will, it's very brave of the director at the time and their curators to actually make this decision just to hang this artwork there and publicly announce my words, because a part of my agreement was that I decide how you tell this story. I will not let you redefine the narrative or my words for telling about this experience. So that the fact that this piece is hanging there as the first piece and that I'm using these words, colonialism, new colonialism, current colonialism in Norway, I think that's brave. And I think in Norwegian standards, that's the farthest you might expect anyone to go in terms of taking a stand. Okay. It's like the Queen and the King of Norway. Like I approached them in desperation and asked for audience with the Queen because she's very interested in art. And I was so surprised that I got audience from her. I was allowed to go and talk to the Queen. But when I was going there, I was questioning myself, what the hell am I going there for? What can she do? And then someone advised me, it's a very important gesture. It's like taking a stand without taking a stand. She welcoming you, opening the doors is support and pressure against the authorities, which is bullshit. You know, we can't work in these soft manners when it's so drastically urgent. But in the end, I did. I went to the Queen as well. Of course, it didn't change anything, but maybe someone, I don't know, read it as a political stand. I don't know.
Termina. Sim, claro.
Bom dia, Maria Vlacho. Como começamos com um ligeiríssimo atraso, decidimos deixar esta sessão até às 11 e depois, em vez de dividir os dois panelistas do próximo, fazer o painel todo junto. Parece-vos bem? Imaginamos que talvez uma outra pergunta ainda vão querer fazer. Sim?
Mais 10 minutos, então. We have 10 more minutes, yes.
Oh.
So, before I make more questions, alguém? Uma pergunta da audiência? Pode ser em português, que depois fazemos a tradução. Deixo-vos mais um tempinho e continuo. E pode ser que faço mais uma e depois volto à audiência.
If there are no questions, then I would like to use my minutes to just inform about what's up on our lands now.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's one question.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask, I think it's really an interesting question and some of the reflections. And thank you very much for the excellent presentation, because there's a lot of things and reflections that I myself also do together with others. But I wanted to ask you, if you yourself working in art, if you do not consider that, art itself is also part of capitalism and extractionism, because, and actually that those structures might actually are ontologically, that mean in their own essence, that's what they are about. And that maybe we might have to think about different strategies. It's just, an hypothesis.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I probably won't be able to answer you on your level because you are talking from the institutional side maybe, or maybe because you have to understand that I'm not a trained artist. My relation to art is very instinctive as a language. So it's just now that even despite that I've been showing in Documenta and Venice Biennial, the market and the structures in the art field are not necessarily for us Sami indigenous artists. So it's just now that I'm gaining access to the international art market, art field. So it's only now that I am starting to understand, what is this about, and how it's actually an economy on its own, which of course brings on the table a lot of new questions that I haven't actually been in the position of even thinking about prior.
So my question is even bigger than institutions. It's really about, and I think it's something, again, what are the limitations of, doing artwork in terms of actually calling attention, and calling attention to whom, you know? I think it's more what I'm speaking about, you know. Who does that reach, you know? Who do we reach, and what are our limitations?
Yeah, so I think that's why I've always used public space as my museum. I've, you know, the Pailo Sápmi works, they have always been just outdoors, on the streets, outside of the courthouses. When we have had performances or guerrilla theaters, it's been on the streets, you know, because I feel that if I were to navigate through museums, it would not reach people. It would reach maybe an, I don't know, a different, like a fake society in a way, not the reality. So for me, if I were to work with the intention of change, I definitely would have worked outside of only museums. Yeah, because I also think, like, my artwork, I did a lot of thinking, like, what did it mean in a public setting, in a public space, and what does it mean when it's hanging inside a gallery? It's quite different. But having its history in public spaces, it still carries an important conversation now in an institution. But had I made the piece primarily to present it in the National Museum, it wouldn't have been activistic in that sense. It wouldn't have had the punch. It wouldn't have reached people in this way.
So
I really want to tell you a last
go
story.
ahead. Go ahead.
Remember in the beginning, when we were fighting the the mining companies in our region, I just want you to be aware that what Norway as a state is now doing in the name of the green shift, they are electrifying the oil industry to make it sustainable. And to do so, they are expropriating more of our lands for windmill parks and for new monster power lines to supply the oil rigs. This is insanity. And the only reason they're doing this is so that you buy the image of Norway to be a responsible environmental authority. But please bear in mind that to electrify the oil industry in my region, it bears a huge cost to us. And we don't know if we can exist there with mining plans still spooking in the back. And then now that the government has approved to electrify, and this power demand to electrify this gas extraction, it's the same demand of energy that our entire region of Finnmark in north of Norway. So that means they have to double, you know, the electricity for this region with the infrastructure, with everything, to be able to continue extracting gas and oil, but do it sustainably and be green while doing this. Can you be green as an oil rig or gas establishment? Just question that a little bit.
Estamos. Mais alguma pergunta? Sim, temos aqui.
Thank you for your presentation and for this opportunity. I would like to ask you which other organizations connect with or movements, animal rights movement. I don't know what other sort of ideas that connect with this struggle for keeping your land can get your fight stronger, and where you find these different groups that can unite with your own ideas. Yes, that's it.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions in that question. But first of all, who have been our allies? Historically, the environmentalists. So in the first struggle from the 70s and 80s, this is when they abolished, the official assimilation of Samis. It was a uprising for claiming Sami rights in Norway. So in doing that, it was also with land destruction as a starting point. So they wanted to dam a river, and that would mean that they would take a lot of grazing lands and an entire village that was very crucial for our people in the region. So it sparked, it was an environmental case, as very often that went hand in hand with the rights campaign of indigenous or Sami people. This is a global tendency, so I think environmentalists. But then you also were talking about animal rights. Again, indigenous philosophy, Sami philosophy or worldview, it sometimes collides because it's, again, interpreted maybe a little bit banal if you're talking about animal rights. So, for instance, the ban of seal skin in Europe was very destructive for Inuit communities because, they could only see a fraction, the killing part, not understanding the codependency and the respect between this animal and the indigenous community and how they utilize this animal and make sure of its environment to exist at all times. So it's always a little bit dangerous and difficult because, it's like a double-edged sword. But usually environmental organizations have been our allies.
Okay. Então, thank you very much, Máret. I think our time is over here. Vamos para intervalo agora? Não.
Máret, thank you so much once again. Provavelmente há mais algumas perguntas, mas vamos ter um coffee break agora. Podem falar com a Máret. Não queríamos também atrasar demasiado, porque temos colegas que vão estar connosco e que têm outros compromissos, é por isso. Portanto, aproveitem o coffee break e mais tarde. 2 ou 3 pequenas coisas rápidas. Primeiro, temos aqui a Ângela Batista, que é a nossa secretária. Quando a Rita falou na Ângela hoje de manhã não tinha chegado, por favor, levanta-te e muito obrigada pelo teu trabalho todo. Já toda a gente trocou e-mails, pelo menos com a Ângela. Obrigada. Depois dizer que há um QR Code na recepção e também na parede, se quiserem ter acesso ao discurso da Máret em português. De qualquer forma, estamos a gravar e tudo o que vai ser dito em inglês e depois em português ficará disponível online. E também o programa, podem ou tirar uma fotografia ou há um QR Code para terem acesso ao programa também. Obrigada e voltamos às 11h30 em ponto. Obrigada, até já.